Welcome back to the video, guys. Today we've got a complete guide on center-fed rooms. We're going to talk about what a center-fed room is, the difference between dynamic and deliberate entries, how we're going to make entry if we're set up on opposite sides of the door as well as on the same side of the door. We're going to talk about how to get through locked and unlocked doors, our responsibilities once a room has been cleared, and we're going to finish it off with some examples of techniques that we've learned through this video. So sit back, get your notepads out, and get ready to learn. Someone asked a question a few videos ago if we could do a guide on center-fed rooms, why we were taking them the way that we were. This is a video response to that question. Breaking it down to its most simple formula, a center-fed room is going to be a room in which the doorway is in the center. That would be different from a corner-fed room where, say, the door would be down here and the door would swing open into the wall. So here the door is going to either be swinging this way or swinging this way that closes in. For this first example, we're just going to have the door open so that it's nice and easy for us to talk things through. As you can obviously see, the problem with a center-fed room is that you're not going to be able to see down into this corner, and you're not going to be able to see down into this corner. That's why we need to have a certain strategy to go forward with this. There's going to be two types of entries that we're making here. The first is going to be a dynamic entry. Second would be a deliberate entry. So the main difference between the two of those is a dynamic entry means we are hearing shots fired in here. We hear someone screaming in here. We need to get into this room ASAP. Think of like an active shooter situation, something like that, or a hostage rescue mission, and we've got a hard count and we're making entry right now because we've failed with negotiations or something like that. Something is going on inside this room that says we need to get in here now, and that is when a dynamic entry would come through. Dynamic entry means we need to get into this room as quick as possible. On the other hand, a deliberate entry would be there's nothing pressing us to get into this room immediately. Maybe we're just doing a clear of a building. There's a guy in here somewhere, but we're not sure where. There's no noises indicating that anything's going on in here. We just need to be as safe as possible. We can go as slow as possible. We've got our whole team with us, and we just want to get in here, clearing as much as we can from the outside. Is going to be how that ends up going on. Real quick, we'll go ahead and start with that deliberate entry method. So I'm going to get these guys stacked up around the corner here to start our deliberate entry. It can be kind of confusing, like the naming system here, deliberate versus dynamic. So just think of deliberate as in, you're really trying to be careful. Everything that you do, you're doing with a slow and methodical purpose. Is kind of the other way that we talk about this. Deliberate is slow and methodical. As we come up here with the first guy, you can see, if you pay attention to our light blue area here as we pull up our guy, that's the vision that he can see into this room. So right now the door is blocking a lot of his room. As we continue to move forward, you see here how he can start to see into the room. So we'll start to move up with him. We'll obviously have all these guys right behind. But as we can see, we can right now see this wall, but we cannot see what's in this corner right here. And that's okay. Right now we're doing a deliberate entry, so we're taking our time, we're going nice and slow. With this deliberate entry, we're going to go ahead and step off of the door a little bit. We're going to come off the door a little bit this way. The reason for that is the closer we are to this wall, the harder it is for us to get a good angle. So as you can see, we'll have this guy continue to just stare this direction. But as we just move him up, you see how much more into this room we can see. So all we did was change his position on the wall. You see here we're nice and tight close to the wall. We can only see this line right here. We can only see to right here. But literally by just pushing off of the wall, now we can see all the way into here. Okay? So we want to stay off of the wall as we're coming around here. It doesn't mean we need to be on the complete opposite side of the hallway, imaginary hallway here. We don't need to be on the complete opposite side, but we do want so that our muzzle is not poking into this door as we walk across, okay? We're going to go ahead and we want to focus here. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start to high our way around this way. So as we continue to pie this way, we're going to start taking off more chunks of this room, right? So as we move over a little bit, we can see in this room a little bit more. If there was a threat right here, we'd be able to engage him from this spot. Exactly. We don't need to press into the room. We're trying to stay on the outside of the room as long as we can with this deliberate entry. So again, we've cleared everything except for this little spot right here, right? As that happens, you know, he's going to move up to this spot and get ready to come into the room second. But there's no rush. There's no rush for us to move in right now. We're going to adjust our aim a little bit further. We're going to start to pie across some more. Again, we don't see anyone, but we're clearing off a bunch of the room. Okay? So again, we're going to keep doing that until we get all the way around to the other side. So now we've made it completely to the opposite side of the door. We have cleared 90% of this room from this side. Now, of course, keep in mind, you know, depending on what type of room this is, it might be a school, like classroom, so there might be desks in here. You might be at a residence. There could be couches, you know, nightstands, TVs, all sorts of things in the middle of the room that could block your view. Regardless, on this deliberate entry, we are still going to push all the way across. And now we've got intersecting lines of fire here. We've cleared 90% of the room. The only thing that we need to check is this hard corner and this hard corner. So this is still with that deliberate entry method. If we go back in time now, we can talk about a dynamic entry. We'll hold off on that for a minute. Right now, we're going to talk about a few of the ways that we can get into the room. Either we're set on the same side of the door, like all three of us would be over here, or we're set up on opposite sides of the door. So here you can see we're set up on opposite sides of the door. There's two methods on how we can do this now. We'll start with one. We're set up on opposite sides of the door and we're worried about someone being here and someone being here. There's two options. Option number one is going to be for number one. We'll pause here. Option number one is going to be for him to go across and for him to go across. So they're going to cross in front of each other here and they'll make entry into the room. Second choice would be for number one to do what's called a button hook, and number two to also do a button hook. So in the button hook, you're disregarding this side and you want to put your muzzle in this side straight across. So this would be called flowing across, and then this would be a button hook. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. If we're set up here on opposite sides of the door, let's just think about for a second how quickly we can get into this room. If I have to basically put my whole body in this doorway, do a complete 180 and come back to this side, is that going to be faster or is that going to be slower than flowing straight across? Obviously it's going to be slower to do a button hook. So that's something important that we're going to want to keep in mind as we go forward into the other types of door entries. Just remember that doing a button hook is going to be slower than it is going to be to flow across. If we're both set up on opposite sides here, the fastest way for both of us to get in is going to be for both of us to flow across. So the advantage to this is I'm going to quickly get a muzzle in this corner from blue here. I'm also going to quickly get a muzzle into this corner from pink here. If we both did a button hook, all while blue is doing a button hook here, it's taken pink also a minute to get this button hook done. If there was someone standing in these corners, say there's a guy standing in this corner, as he starts the button hook, I'm going to be getting shot in the back by this guy until he can figure out how to get into this room behind me. Again, it takes just an extra second to do that button hook. We would rather go ahead and have both guys flow across. That's going to be faster for both of us to make entry. That gets muzzles into these corners the fastest from both operators, and that means that there's a less likelihood of us getting shot in the back. If we're both set up on on opposite sides here, preferred method is going to be to flow across. Okay? So that is going to take care of pretty much the deliberate entries. If you're doing deliberate, you're going to go ahead and do that pie slowly across, and then you'll be able to make entry from opposite sides. So now we will talk about a dynamic entry. Dynamic again means that we've set up on the outside of this room and active shooter situation, hostage rescue, something like that is going down, and we need to get into this room as quickly as possible. If we're going as quickly as possible, We're not going to set up on the outside here, slowly pie our way across. We're going to get into this room right away. We're coming from this side of the door. So we're going to bring the whole team to this side. In this situation, we're needing to get in here fast. Same as before, we can see straight into this room as we're coming up on our approach. Now this example here, the door is open. Things would obviously be different if we have to get into an unlocked or through a locked door. So to keep things nice and simple, we've got this open threshold here. Now we need to do a dynamic entry. We need to get in here fast. We're going to go ahead and bypass worrying about flashbangs, stuff like that. Right now we're really just talking about troop movements. But just real quickly, number 2 man would be throwing a flashbang if we were throwing one. We're mainly focused here on our troop movements. So as we talked about before, there's 2 ways for us to get into this room, right? We can either flow across, or we can have number 1 here button hook. Okay. Number 1 man here, he hasn't seen all the way into this corner, but he has seen a little bit right here that he knows is clear as he's approaching the door. So there's multiple schools of thought. I don't want you guys to get too caught up on it, because one way is not right, one way is not wrong. It's honestly personal preference. If you go to 100 different guys, you're going to get 100 different answers on why you should do one way or the other. So I'm just going to tell you guys what my preference is coming from the SWAT team. If I am the point man, my biggest concern is not getting shot in the back. If I see someone in front of me, I'm confident in my ability to take care of that. But I do not want to get shot in the back. If we think about this from this guy's perspective, this is dead space. We don't know what's here. And then obviously all of this, we don't know what's here yet. There is a possibility that there's someone in this corner. There's also a possibility that there's someone way over here. Let's think about it. If I flow across, this is going to be the fastest way for me to make entry. Sort of like how we were talking before, set up on opposite sides. The fastest way for me to get into this room is going to be to flow straight across. But because we're all stacked up on this same side of the door, that means for number 2 to come in, he's going to have to do that button hook that we were talking about earlier. Now keep in mind, it takes longer for this guy to do a button hook than it does for you to go straight across. As the number 1 man, as you're flowing straight across, number 2 is doing a button hook behind you. That means my back is exposed to all of this area as I'm making entry. If there's a guy in this corner, I'm going to be taking rounds in the back before this guy has a chance to get into the room. Now, nobody said that CQB was not dangerous. CQB is probably one of the most dangerous things you can do. You want to avoid it at all costs if you can. But if you flow straight across as number 1, number 2 is going to have to button hook here, right? Because no matter what, if number 1 man goes left, number 2 man goes right. Number 3 is going to go left with him. Number 4, if we had one, would go right. You're just going to flow left, right, through this whole situation. As you can see in this situation, it's going to take a second for our number 2 man to get into the building. For me, I don't like that. So if I'm number 1 man coming through here, like I said, there's no right way or wrong way to do this. But my preference in this situation, where we're set up on the same side of the door, I want my number 1 man to do a button hook. So my reasoning here is, as I come around, I've cleared this already. And then as you can sort of watch with the blue line here, our nice light blue line, you can see that I'm clearing the majority of the room on my way in to do this button hook. Now, you guys are saying, well, what about this corner? What if there's got someone waiting right here? Well, that's where the beauty of number 2 man flowing across is going to come in. So as number 1 is doing this button hook, it's taking a second for me to get this button hook done, right? Because it's a slower maneuver. Number 2 is going to be pushing straight across, right? And like we talked about before, pushing across is much faster than doing a button hook. For me, I'm getting to have my eyes on the majority of the room, and I'm going to have my number 2 man watching my back as fast as possible, right? So it's faster for him to flow across than it is for him to do a button hook. 6 is going to be covered faster by number 2 man pushing straight across here. And as you can see here, just watch how quickly his muzzle gets in this corner. Right? So his muzzle's already up before he's even through the threshold of the door. So if there was someone waiting right here, it's going to be faster for him to get that muzzle there than it would be for me to push across. So we can show that real quick. So now we will show the opposite, we'll show number 1 man here flowing straight across, and we'll show number 2 doing the button hook. So again, focus on this guy and his muzzle getting into this corner and see how much longer it takes. Right, so it took an extra second there before he was able to sweep all the way around. That whole time is time that we could be getting shot in the back as the number 1 man. Which is why I prefer for number 1 to do the button hook and number 2 to push straight across. There's one more method here that we can sort of talk about, and that is the center check. This basically combines the best of everything. Again, number 1 man here, he can't see into this hard corner. He's starting to see this area here. So instead of just like laser focusing on this corner as he comes around to do his button hook, what we want to do instead is as we come to the center here, we're going to pause for just half a second. I don't want you guys to think that this is a long pause. So as we come into the room, we're going to pause for half a second in this doorway. Now, again, you don't stop in doorways. That's the fatal funnel. We don't want to stop there. But instead of just, having our gun at high ready or low ready and getting through this doorway and immediately punching it out into this corner, we're just going to take a slight angle so that our gun can be up. We're able to process some information here on the middle of the room before we make entry. And then as we're making entry, we can start to collapse here into this button hook. As you can see here, we're just taking an extra second to clear everything on our way into this corner. So it's not a long pause, pretty much still just flowing. We're not stopping or anything. We just want to take that extra second to say for sure that we've cleared the center of the room. Because let's say we are coming across here, and as we're coming across, we see someone right here. So it would be very stupid for us, we'll pretend this guy's gone, it'd be very stupid for us to just bypass a guy standing right here and be like, oh, well, I gotta check my hard corner. No, if there's a guy standing right here, you can start shooting rounds at this guy. And if you need to flow into the room, you can, but typically you don't want to chase your bullets. So maybe you send a couple rounds and you can continue across to this side. Obviously, everyone knows that we're in a gunfight now, so things have changed. So it's just something to keep in mind. My personal preference there would be to have number 1 man do just a slight center check, continue with his button hook, and then number 2 flows in right behind. So that pretty much is going to cover our dynamic and deliberate entries. So now we'll talk about how we're going to work on rooms with doors that are closed. Up here, we've got our locked door. How we handle the locked and the unlocked door are going to be pretty much the same. So we're going to go ahead and assume that we've got plenty of guys here. We're really just working on this door right now. So we've got the whole stack with us, all 16 other guys. We've got long held. We're not worried about any of these other angles. Right now, we're just focused on the door right here. As we come to this door, Jones here is going to be our breacher. As these guys come across, typically he's going to have his breaching tools out already. We'll go ahead and have him step to the side. It doesn't really let us do that in this game, but that's okay. Typically, he's going to have his breaching tools out already. We've got plenty of guys set up and ready to have their guns up. Breacher here, breacher is blue. Cobra is going to be watching this door, and he is going to run his plates to the door with his muzzle up, and he's going to be waiting right here. Our breacher is going to follow behind him, using his plates for cover, right? Because he's got his breaching tool up. And he's going to come all the way around to this door handle. So you see how we have a nice cover there. He is watching the door. He's going to be working on breaching. And then this guy has become our new number 1 man. As we have stacked up here, we're on the door handle side. Breacher is going to hit this door. We've got this set up in a way that, obviously he would swing his hammer from the other side. The game's only got so many animations in it. He would hit this door from the other side. But as you can see, we're set up here on opposite sides of the door. So we've got our guy who's going to breach number 1 right here, and we've got our cover officer for our breacher. right? So keep in mind, our breacher does not have a gun up while he's got the breaching tool in his hand. He's got the breaching tool in his hand, he's got a gun. So as this door swings open, you can see Cobra here can look into this room. So imagine there was a bad guy standing right here as we breached the door. If there was a bad guy standing right here with his gun pointed at the door and he started shooting, you know, Jones is in a bad spot. He doesn't have a gun, he's got a breaching tool in his hand, and he's pretty much SOL if someone started shooting. He still is SOL if someone starts shooting, but at least Cobra is standing right here with his gun up and is able to put rounds on him. This is probably going to look familiar from what we just showed. Now we've got a center fed room and we've got guys set up on opposite sides of the door. We've got two options. We can either have number 1 button hook and number 2 button hook, which I would say is a bad idea because why? It's going to take a minute for these guys to come around and do their button hook. It's going to be much faster for number 1 to flow in and for number 2 to flow in right behind him. Now, what if we've got a closed door, but it's going to be unlocked? Essentially, we're going to treat this exactly the same as we would if there was a locked door, right? Because we're not going to know that it's locked or unlocked until we put our hand on the door handle. Remember that you always try before you pry. So we're going to try the door handle before we breach it. But everything's going to be exactly the same here. We're going to have him ready to come across. He's going to put his plates in front of the door. He's going to be our cover officer as he comes around to check the door. We use our plates to block for this guy. We're going to get our gun up. He's got his gun up here. And now Jones is going to be able to swing this door open. Now, exactly the same as before. We're set up on opposite sides of the door. We can either double button hook, or we can have number 1 push across and number 2 push across right behind him. And that's going to be what we want to do. So this guy's going in first. He's going to come in second. We're just going to flow along these walls because that's the fastest way for us to get into these rooms. Perfect. So as you can see, he had minimal time with his back exposed. Rimmer was right behind, able to take out this guy before he got shot in the back. So now we can sort of talk about what our responsibilities are once we get into this room. We're set up on the same side here, so we'll go ahead and pretend that we are doing a dynamic entry. We're trying to get in here as fast as possible. So we're going to have number 1 button hook. Number 2 is going to flow straight across. And then number 3, like we said, if number 1 goes right, number 2 goes left. So number 1 is also going to go right. We'll talk about sort of our areas of responsibility once we get in here. Once we have cleared the corner, there's no reason for us to just have our gun pointed at this empty corner. If we've said that it's cleared, we've said that it's cleared. So now, as we make entry into this room, we've cleared all of our hard corners. So now we're going to start a sweep. He is going to start to turn this direction, right? So he's looking this way. He's going to turn this direction until he makes contact with this guy. So now he's going to start to turn this direction, right? He cleared the corner, so he's going to turn this direction until we intersect lines of fire. Now we know that this whole room is clear. Now whatever our SOP is, we can either exit the room, or if there was another door, we would pick up on that door. So say there was a door right here. He's facing the wall. He's facing the wall. He would start his sweep this way. Boom. He's looking at a door now, right? So we'll have him focused on this door. He's cleared his corner. Now he's going to sweep around. Now they've intersected, and he's like, oh, there's a door here. Cool. Now we've got 2 muzzles on the door, and we'll start to make our movement towards the door. All right, so here's just an example of why we would want to do one way or another. Again, we're set up in a single stack here. We're all on the same side of the door. Obviously, it's pretty apparent that if we were set up on opposite sides of the door, it's fastest for each side to just flow across. I think that's pretty apparent. But here, we're going to show the example of why I prefer to have number 1 do the button hook versus flow straight across. Keep in mind, if we have number 1 flow straight across, that means we're going to have number 2 button hook. And it takes a longer amount of time for number 2 to button hook. So as he's watching this hard corner, he's going to watch this hard corner. This is an example of why I would rather have number 1 do the button hook instead of flow across. It did take him a second to get his gun up to start shooting, but as you could see, he was shooting as he was coming through the door. So Bremer ended up taking the rounds instead of Jones. But as you can see, he was shooting, and this guy had no idea because he's focused on this door. So we'll reset. Now in this instance, we're going to have Jones do that button hook. And we're going to have Bremer here flow straight across. And this is why I prefer to enter the room this way. So this guy never even got a shot off before he had gun pointed in his face. So again, as we can see here, since we didn't do that center check, we haven't really cleared this section of the room yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to have him turn. We're going to have him turn until they intersect. And then we can say that this room is cleared. I think that has pretty much covered everything that we want to cover when it comes to dynamic versus deliberate. So again, we like to have number one, if we're set up on the same side of the door here, we'd like to have number one do that button hook so number two can flow straight across. Just gets his gun into this hard corner faster, and it's easier for him to flow straight across. So I think that's pretty much going to cover our guide here. Again, high points, dynamic versus deliberate. If it's a dynamic entry, it means we need to get in here quick, fast, and in a hurry. If it's deliberate, we can go ahead and do that pie along from the outside while looking in to see if we can clear the majority of the room from the outside. We talked about same side versus opposite side. Again, if we're set up on opposite sides, go ahead and have both guys flow across rather than both do button hooks. And then if we're set up on the same side here, again, I prefer to do that center check and then have number one button hook while number two flows across. So that's going to cover our complete everything you need to know guide on center fed rooms. If you guys have any questions, please drop them down in the comments. Have a friendly discussion down there on the benefits of different techniques for entering rooms. If you would, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on so you're notified when new videos like this come out, and we'll see you in the next one.